6, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1.
Good evening. Thank you for attending the Complete Street Safety Committee. We would like to call the meeting to order now. Can we do a roll call?
I'm going to go left to right. Detmer,
Present.
Strecker,
Present.
Cabrera,
Present.
Wozniak,
Present.
Tainter.
Okay. Can we have it in a motion to adopt the agenda?
I'll make a motion to adopt the agenda.
I'll second that.
Can we get a roll call?
Detmer,
Aye.
Strecker,
Aye.
Cabrera,
Aye.
Wozniak,
Aye.
Tainter. Thank you.
Can we move the screen to the appropriate page, please? I think we're on the next page.
Oh.
Thank you.
So the agenda has been adopted. So now let's go into oral communication. Do we have anybody online? We don't see anybody here present that would like to do some oral communication.
No oral communications at this time.
Okay. Okay, so can approval of the minutes. Can I get a motion to approve of the minutes of last meeting?
I'll motion to approve the minutes from last meeting, June 7th.
I'll
Second. Oh, go ahead. I'll second.
Can we get a roll call?
Detmer,
Aye.
Strecker,
Aye.
Cabrera,
Aye.
Wozniak,
Aye.
Tainter.
Aye.
Thank you.
So we have approved the last meeting minutes. So now we're going to go into old business, which is continue working on the investigation of residential parking permit program for Central Brisbane. So Karen circulated a memo. She has some instructions from council, and we're going to be discussing this new direction that is in the memo and how we're going to go about it. Thomas, can you put the memo on the screen?
Oh yeah, 1 second. I have I had the rest of your attachments, but not the memo.
The PDF has the memo too.
Oh, okay. Right.
The other one.
Oh, wait, the other one. This one.
That one. Yeah. So a couple of things before we start the meeting. Just wanted to frame this meeting to make sure that we are continue to follow the cues of council. We cannot have any subcommittees. We're going to continue working on the parking permit, and that's until it gets done. So just in general, for everybody, feel free to shim in during the process, and don't be shy about it. Okay, so this is we welcome everybody's opinion. Okay. The other thing that I want to mention is, we welcome Commander Garcia, and maybe as a suggestion, I want to say that we probably bring the subject that is related to him, so we sort of get that out of the way. I don't know how everybody feels about it. Looks like that's a good approach. Okay, so how about if we have, if we just, so this is not a lengthy memo, right? Should we just read it, or should we just go ahead and, because you know what we also have is we have two documents, because what we also want to do is, you know, keep building and adjusting, you know, from what we have done in the past. And obviously now we have more, you know, fine-tuned directions how to get there. But we also wanted, you know, keep in mind that we have done a lot of work, so we could always go back and reference to what we have done and keep fine-tuning it. Okay. So should we go ahead and read the memo? Do you want to read the first part, Pat?
I guess I would call it option number one or potential program number one, which is called Targeted Streets Permit Program. It would cover the streets of Thomas, Tulare, Kings, Alvarado, and Humboldt only. An existing ordinance already provides for a limited permit program utilizing parking stickers. The city mails out ballots to only residents of those streets. Residents vote on whether they want permitted parking on their street or not and mail the ballot back. Compliant-based resident reporting with enforcement by Brisbane police, similar to present after 72 hours, after a car has been there 72 hours. Downside, limited enforcement / logistics of the annual renewal program or annual renewal process. Advantage, elimination of extra cars and airport parkers. Items to be considered are identifying how many residents need to be notified, identify the cost to mail out the quote-unquote ballot based on the number of residents living on those streets, and then finally identify the cost to have stickers made annually.
Thank you, Pat. So at this point, you know, I think is relevant, you know, also as we want to talk about things that are related to Commander Garcia area, so to speak. So based on what Pat read, we're going to go around, and we might start with Linda. How does she feels about this new with this new point and directions that we're getting from the council?
Christian.
Thank you.
Sorry, if you scroll down in the memo, don't the council member, the liaisons later say further down? Enforcement by LAS can be added to programs 1 and 3 at additional cost.
It does say that on the backside.
And program 1, too small to be put on a ballot, so it would have to be approved solely by council or by neighborhood vote. So even though it says the one thing, there are 2 options on program 1, that being to go with a enforcement consultant and to have the council decide versus a vote, just so you guys think about that when you think about number 1.
Can I get a clarification, Karen? So I guess is the prerogative here to sort of look into all 3 and come back with all 3 options laid out in more detail? Is it for us to sort of discuss and figure out which of these 3 options we present?
So what I talked to Councilmember Mackin, who has also communicated with Cunningham, so both of our liaisons, and they want to hear, they think there are these 3 types of programs or the ways to approach it, but they want to hear all the ideas about it. They don't want you guys to necessarily have a majority vote or a unanimous vote. They kind of want to, you know, let's put everything out there. What are the different ways that we could accomplish this? So it's going to be kind of, you know, on staff to figure out how to put that into agenda report. She also the direction was to have the big broad brush in the agenda report and all of the details in like an appendix to it. So not going into fine details in the body of the report. Just here's the way the three would work, and here's the details. Some of this, I think, how many neighbors on those streets, the staff can do that. I don't expect you guys to go through the assessor's role to figure that out. I think that's more of, some of those would be staff roles, but the policy level, how it could work, and, that's for you guys to kind of frame. Does that make sense?
I think that's helpful.
Okay.
Yeah, thank you for that, Karen. Just a little background. Karen did, talk to Colleen specifically about this, so she has more insight, and feel free, Karen, to jump in and clarify some of these points, because I'm sure you could read in between the lines.
One further thing is the two liaisons to complete streets are behind pursuing this, but she did clarify, like, we are two of the 5 council members, and the other ones may think differently about what we discussed than the two of them. So it's not guaranteed that one of these will be implemented in the short term. And then, not exactly on this topic, was it at the end of her report that she wanted to kind of dismiss the idea of a trial? Like, we're going to pick one of these and pursue it. And if, I think there could be a case where there's a lot of negative feedback and it's disposed of, but the goal was, now we kind of pick one or the other and go forward with it, instead of trying a small area and then proposing going to the whole city.
Could I ask a question on that?
Yes, you may.
If the targeted streets were not a trial, how were these streets picked?
As the ones with the biggest problems in the minds of one or more council members at the meeting.
Okay. And on the existing ability to have a permit program on a particular block, has anyone ever tried to implement that in the city that you know of?
I only know anecdotally that it's been discussed by some neighbors and never brought forward to the city council. But I just did read the ordinance today, and it puts a lot of burden on the residents. Mm-hmm. So they've got to put a permit together. You've got to talk to your neighbors, and you can't anonymously vote on a little ballot that's mailed to you. You have to talk to your neighbors and, plant your flag about your position about it. And then all of the burden of the cost was on those neighbors to pay for the signs, to pay for getting permits, all of that. So I think our model is a little bit different, makes it a little bit easier if residents are interested but don't want to maybe make enemies with neighbors or that type of thing.
Okay, thank you.
Good questions, Pat. So also, before we have give Linda the chance to express her opinion on point number 1. On the bottom too, what the council has asked us is to pretty much go back to the cities that staff gave us, and and we compile all the data, and we ended up, with the different reports that we have submitted, and with an open eyes. And so based on this new, the directions that we're getting from this memo. So are you ready, Linda?
Thank you. I don't see this memo as something that we can pick apart and choose what we want to do with it. I recognize it more as marching orders with the items identified in blue as what we're expected to do. And I think this is a good idea. I'm not sure how the timing is going to work out, or if that's even being considered in case this goes to ballot. But at this point, it doesn't matter. We need to just do the identification of the residents, the costs, and the stickers, and present that. We don't need to do any more than present ideas, and all ideas are valid. If we have additional ideas to add to this, they're all valid. And I just want to thank you, Karen, because for years, this is actually our 10th year as a committee. So happy anniversary. And I've been on the committee for 9 years. And Karen has always steered us to looking at more options and that we're not the final say. And so I'm happy that this has come back and that with your guidance, we're going to proceed in a way where the entire committee has a say about what's next. So thank you.
Thank you for that, Linda. Gregory?
I mean, so basically we choose one of these three programs or three options, and then we kind of discuss which one to pursue, or is it just the Targeted Streets Permit Program? That's my question.
So they gave us three options and with some specific action items per action to enrich them with data and then report back to them more like a menu.
Okay.
Okay.
No, I think I agree with the council. I'm definitely looking at, as Linda said, the marching orders in some ways. And yeah.
So just a little reminder. So, I mean, one of my objective here, or one of the objective for us to talk about these points, you know, we are, they are marching orders, but we also want to discuss among them. Like, for instance, when you see this Target Street permit program, what does that, how do you imagine it? How is this going to impact, you know, Commander Garcia, you know, department of, you know, the police department, because most likely he's going to be the one to enforce it. So I think as we go point by point, we want to have a discussion to sort of, you know, talk about these things. And then, you know, because we need to, you know, provide the points that they want, the good, the ugly, and the bad. So just feel free to comment on it.
Excuse me, if I can just add that it's very clear that it's going to be complaint-based. And so residents reporting will then get enforcement. And it'll pretty much be the same as how it is currently. Maybe a change in hours, I'm not sure, for the complaint. But you know, I don't think we get to pick and choose through this. We need to do all of the things. It's not a menu. It's an entire document with what we've been asking for is clarification, and we got it. And so this is rather easy now. You know, we just need to answer the questions in the blue and do our research, and we can get through this pretty quickly.
Can I tend to agree with Linda. I think a lot of the work's done here. It's just, you should discuss it and talk about if you think there are more issues, more advantages, disadvantages, I think is fair to discuss. If anything else needs to be identified, but you know, this menu where staff is going to bring to council with whatever more research or information that you guys have to add, or also thoughts about it, I think is fine. Like concern that this wouldn't work because, or I think you should have a vote of the targeted streets. It sounds like, you know, it could be a vote of just those neighbors. It could be a council decision, you know.
I think the council's looking for feedback from those people to see if we move forward or the popularity, how it feels to those targeted streets that are some of the worst ones.
Yeah, I just was confused because later, further down in this memo, it did say program 1 is too small to be put, too small to be put on a ballot, so would be approved solely by council. You know, I remember if at the April council meeting, the city attorney, the city attorney wasn't clear, but the legal counsel said it would be a public advisory vote regardless. There's still got to be an ordinance to enforce this on public streets. Mm-hmm. So even if it were citywide, it would still be advisory. In both cases, the council have to approve the program. So I guess so what you're saying is you understand this as we want a mailer to everybody to see their interest before the council decides whether to do it or not. And it could be, we don't know, if the council got a 51% majority, they could decide to do it, or they might, between them, 1 and 80% majority, or we don't really know at this point. Is that what your understanding of it is?
Yes, I think we're just providing information so the council can make a choice based on the information they feel they need to look over. That's why I think it's going to be easy. If all we really have to do is focus on the work in the blue, with maybe a little more work if it comes up for us to look, then this is going to be a matter of research and sending it on to council.
Yeah, I think I agree with that. And this is a fantastic, I think, guidance for us in terms of what we need to, iron out. And I think, like you pointed out, a lot of this has already been done in the past. We just need to kind of go back to the data we collected and maybe identify a few other points and do a little bit more research. But yeah, I tend to think that this is a great guideline for us and sort of address the points and send it along.
Well, I think council is also asking for our thoughts on, and I'll just put it down to upside, downside, the same way it's put here. Are there additional upside, downside, or questions that need to be answered that have not been put on this paper for each of these items? And I think it's incumbent upon us then to list down what we think those questions might be that are in our mind. And however the research gets done, is it done by staff or whatever? I have some questions, for example, on number 1, but
I think
I'll wait till it's my turn.
For the record.
Yes, go ahead, ask them, please.
Okay, I guess, so for a targeted program, that's already on the books, that kind of a program. A city could, a block of residents could organize themselves and petition the city to have a permit program on that block. So this is just a kind of a city-initiated way of doing that rather than neighbor.
Yes.
Okay, so I guess my first question is, are there any other cities where that we can look at where this is being done to see what their experience with this has been? That might help formulate or help us identify or help the city identify and potential problems or so forth.
I'm sure there are some cities, and Commander Garcia knows of a couple, but I'm not sure that we would be able to find the same staff that, depending on the age of the program, that initiated it and all the background as to how it was decided, how it was developed. Like everything isn't available on the internet if it was 20 years ago, or every council meeting for a city that adopted it isn't necessarily there. But I know that you found a couple of residential ones. I don't know if you know very much about how they were formed or.
Actually, right off the bat, even if you do a Google search, Beverly Hills has what's called a preferential parking districts. And it's kind of laid out in the same fashion that our ordinance laid out how you can establish the program. They do have several pages of their Muni code that kind of spell out how it's being administered. So that is definitely one of the areas that they can do. Down south has several parking permit programs, and they're all term preferential, and they are neighborhood initiated based. So yes, there are neighborhoods that way.
Okay. I guess, one of the thoughts, because we had discussed this over the last 2 years as we went through the parking permit program, looking at it. One of the concerns that kept cropping up is that if there's an isolated area, and we're talking not a district here, we're talking a block or 2 blocks or several blocks long. Is there the opportunity for people who do not have a permit or who do not want to get a permit simply to park on a different street? And so while this may relieve, problems on this particular block, the permitted block, does it just create a bigger problem or force cars onto other streets and create problems for other people? That's why I was trying to see if there were other analogous type programs that we could look at or gain from their experience.
I think you're spot on. If you restrict let's say, for example, parking on one street and then the abutting street doesn't have that program, all you're going to do is chase those cars to another street, which you would then pass on an issue if there was a parking issue to other streets. So that is a potential possibility. Yes.
Okay. I wonder if we, I'm sorry.
That's a that's a very good question, and as I mentioned earlier, we want to discuss, have a wide and broad discussion, and at times even play the devil's advocate, because when we give this to the to council, we want them to have a broad understanding of the different points, right? So, for instance, on this point, it's good that we have clarification at the beginning. We didn't know if it's a trial or why not. So now it's a targeted street permit program. With this type of program, we have the option that we could go with the stickers, or we could go with electronic surveillance. And one of the things that we like to ask Commander Garcia, because council did stress on cost, especially now with the way the economy is, we want to be very concerned about cost. So for those 5 streets, Commander Garcia, what is your take, when you have like different, the residents calling you that there's problem with the people parking on the street that don't have the parking permit? How are you going to handle that? Do you need extra resources, et cetera, et cetera?
Most definitely. I mean, one thing that I did not say, and I haven't expanded on it yet, is all of these cities that I've surveyed that have residential parking permit programs, if I can say this correctly, have parking divisions. It is not enforced by the police department, only because the police department has priorities that they need to investigate crimes and, crime suppression, other crime suppression issues that before they go enforce on a parking permit program. Now, when you, and I should make this disclosure too, you kind of have to identify what you're trying to basically gain by this program, because if you put this program out there and residents are going to expect a routine enforcement, I hate to tell you this, but the police department would not be an aid to make this program successful. We don't have the bandwidth to do that with the current staffing. If it's complaint-based, it has to be stressed that it's completely complaint-based. So based on the 72-hour rule now, if someone were to call, we would go out there, mark the vehicle, and move on. We would not then go through all the streets and then mark every single vehicle. So this may be crafted differently, where this is a complaint-based only program, because there may be streets that we may never get calls on that have permits and other cars are there. Well, then we're not going to go through inventory those vehicles every night because we don't have that current bandwidth. There are ways to gain that program by, LAS or whatever third-party vendor we can do, but the current staffing that we have now does not afford us to do that.
Thank you for your answer. Go ahead, Linda.
Well, just in quick response to Commander Garcia, I think it must be a complaint-based program. We do not have the money to hire another person. We don't have the parking meter maids. We're a small town. We don't really need them. So I think probably it's a good idea to just start from complaint-based makes the most sense for monetarily and for the police department. And then going back to Patrick's topic, because we've been hitting several, but what came to mind when you were talking, Patrick, is that a long time ago when we worked on the safe routes to school, the pedestrian safe routes to school, that was a huge project. Mm-hmm. And one of the things we were trying to figure out was how to get it moving. And we identified other cities with the safe route, pedestrian route, forget what the program was called, Karen.
Safe pedestrian routes to schools.
Okay, that's it. And what Colleen did was she took the initiative of phoning other cities and asking if they had that program and how that program was run. And she was also able to get things that were not necessarily posted on the internet. And I think that might be a really wise way to go when we're looking at other cities. And there's a bunch of them that are close to us, like Marin, Mill Valley, some on the peninsula that have sticker parking programs. And I made a list of those. I kind of threw it out after our last meeting, but it's easy enough to find. And then to find the phone number, maybe we could split that load up and see what we come back with specific questions that we want to ask. We might have done this also more recently. I recall we had a list of specific questions, Pat, you might remember, where we were calling other cities and asking how they did it.
Right.
So we don't need to reinvent the wheel.
No,
we just
I
need
don't
to go
think
and
so.
talk to people that have already done it and what the problems were and how they dealt with it. So I just wanted to respond to your statements. Thank you.
Thank you, Linda.
I guess I did have a question on the targeted parking program. In terms of these 5 streets, in the last, say, 2 or 3 years, Commander Garcia, how many complaints have there been on those? Or I guess, could you look into that perhaps if you don't happen to know? Or have there been a lot of complaints? Is that a metric we could get?
Yeah, I could definitely look into that and bring it back.
I'm curious to see how common it's been brought up already as an issue and just maybe we can kind of use that as benchmark. But as I thought.
Oh, go ahead, Greg.
And something I was thinking about, I'm not sure we could add, going to with what Patrick said before about with the targeted streets, maybe that additional, we can add that additional downside, which is something I think we had talked about before, which is the potential for spilling over onto other streets because of, the fact that people might not want to get the permit or whatever, and so they'll just go to another street, then just park on the street and then cause issues for other streets. I'm not sure if that's something we can add to it as a downside or just when it's presented to council or,
Yeah, I mean, that's the type of stuff we want to incorporate in the document. And when I met with Tomas and Karen, we looked at 2 cities, Union City and San Mateo City. And San Mateo City, although it's a big city, and we didn't pick that in our when we did our cities earlier. But when we looked at it, it was interesting that they had. So in their city, they have some sections that have parking permit programs and some sections that they don't. And they also have a document. So they basically have a program where what Pat was saying, like right now, what we're doing is we're taking the initiative to provide those 5 streets, those 5 targeted streets with parking permit program. But in some other cities, there's a form that they fill out, and then they request it, and if they meet the criteria, then they get a parking permit, program in their street. So if there's I'm envisioning, in the long run, if we have these 5 streets, and then there's a spill, where those cars are spilling, those people on those streets could get together and do a petition. And, we could get them to have a parking permit program. Go ahead, Pat.
I had a couple more questions on this. It looks like the way this is designed, we would use the existing law of 72 hours for parking. Is that correct? We would not be changing it to a 24-hour?
I read that as complaint-based resident reporting with enforcement by BPD.
Yes, that's
Similar
correct.
to what they currently do after 72 hours.
Right. So we would not, so it would be after the complaint is received, the car is tagged, then it would be 72 hours from that point?
That's not what I'm saying.
Okay.
Similar to what they're doing with a 72-hour abandoned vehicle law now, but in whatever the terms are of this program. That I don't know, but that's how I'm reading it. You still have the 24-hour.
Yeah, so basically, if you were to put a permit program, a complaint permit program in place, that would not commingle with the 72-hour rule. So theoretically, this is how it would work. Someone complained on the street, vehicle doesn't have a sticker. Let's say we went to it with a visual sticker program. We would get there, doesn't have a sticker, we would cite it. And then we would also put a 72-hour tag on it and saying it has to move within 3 days, because you can keep citing this vehicle for 5 to 7 days and it'll just stack up tickets. Well, we're not going to get to the 7 days. We're going to get to 72 hours. And then our vehicle code would then enact us to be able to tow the vehicle off the street.
So as soon as, when the complaint is received, as soon as an officer is able to get to the car, then it would receive a ticket, a citation right at that point in time, whether it was 1 hour or 5 hours after the complaint?
Absolutely. We would not have the ability to say, okay, there's a license plate or what car. We'll come back in 4 hours, and if it's still here, we'll tag it. We don't have that ability.
Right.
So if this was a complaint based, the vehicle could actually get a warning and a ticket.
So that's real teeth, in my opinion.
Absolutely, yes.
Yeah.
Because those two cannot commingle. One is the California Vehicle Code, and one is the Muni Code that's enacted.
Okay. Let me ask a question. I mean, this is as much just for information. On an average activity day for Brisbane police, if you were to receive a complaint of a parked car, and it's probably going to come in during the daytime, I would imagine.
Correct.
How long, on average, do you think it would be for an officer to come out and issue a citation?
I mean, depending on our current collateral and workload, it could be anywhere between 6 minutes to 3 to 4 hours.
Okay.
We would definitely get to it as soon as we could, but if we're busy and an officer is at the jails and another officer just wanting general calls, we wouldn't have the bandwidth to get there right away.
Understood.
So we would have that leeway.
Okay. Thank you.
That's a great clarification. My understanding was a little different, but this is why we have this type of discussion to get that clarification. So I'll make another point here. Just going into more of the cost side of things. So this targeted street permit program, we could use LAS or we could use stickers. But one of the things to keep in mind is with either or, you have to evaluate the cons and pros. Let's say we use stickers. That sounds like a cheap, way to do it. It sounds like a feasible way to do it. But you need to tease out the implementation of the sticker program, even when it's complaint-based, versus running the program. Just to implement it, most likely you're going to have like some sort of either a plug in the city website or its own little website where you're going to be able to process a lot of the petitions of the stickers, et cetera, et cetera. But once it's running, my guess is that it's going to be a lot cheaper than LAS. Versus LAS, you're not going to have that upfront cost, but they're going to be hitting you with that either monthly or yearly cost, whatever it is. And I think Karen had to have some numbers that she got from LAS, that it would cost, that they would charge for these 5 streets. Can you share that, Karen?
So for LAS to enforce, which means we want them to drive those targeted streets every day, it was 4,000 something a month. It's 52,000 a year. That's the best they could do. I guess they're coming from San Mateo, drive up, do their loop, issue tickets, go back.
So if we ask, Commander Garcia for his department of, police here, how much does he think is going to add on, to have this complaint based on this parking permit? I'm sure he might not have that information right off his back, but if you could estimate.
I could even take a guess right now. I mean, I'd have to go back to my staff and get those numbers. And what are you asking for in terms of cost? How much it would cost us?
So, with LAS, it would cost about, is it 2,000 or 4,000 a month? 4,000 a month to do this 5 street, right?
Yeah.
But obviously, it's not complaint based. But if the city, the Department of Police in Brisbane, we do the complaint based with the sticker, just hypothetically, how much do you think you're going to need extra resources, or this is going to incur extra costs?
It's a good question. If we were to go with a digital program, which were, a complaint base wouldn't really, benefit off of a digital program because, LAS and us as a complaint-based program are way different. One is unbiased, they're coming through, everyone's getting tagged, versus us now getting a call and we going out there and addressing that one vehicle on that one street that one night, and then that's all we get for the night. It may have very minimal cost depending on who's complaining on that street and how many times they complain. So the cost, I couldn't venture to guess right now, but it would be very different in terms of again, we would do it with our staff, but then again, we would do it with the time that we're allotted to do it with.
And I just want to clarify from speaking to Councilmember Mackin, who's communicated with Councilmember Cunningham, their desire to try to use a complaint-based system with the Brisbane PD is to not pay any cost. So they're not asking to compare, I need a new part-time person, I need a new full-time person. It's whatever you can do with the staff you have, and we understand that's limited. So they are saying they're going to think about apples and oranges and which one they want.
I don't know if this helps, but pre-pandemic, we had a lot more calls of residents calling in vehicles that may have been there more than 72 hours. Moving forward, we go through pandemic, and we kind of put a halt to that, hiatus to that, because everyone had to stay home. Post-pandemic, coming out of it, our complaints on parking have gone down tremendously. In a week span, yes. So I think what happened was maybe during the pandemic, people either got rid of cars they didn't want to get needed, or somehow these neighborhoods, streets came to an agreement on, okay, we kind of all found our resting spots on the street. So we don't get that. If I were to take a cross section of a week on how many complaints we get of vehicles now that people say are parked over 72 hours, I think we're right underneath 10. So, and that's throughout the city of Brisbane. We get 10 maybe. Prior to that, we were probably getting 15 to 20, even higher, but it's gone down really low now. Mm-hmm. So yeah, I don't know if that kind of frames things for you.
No, it does. It's those are very good point. Anyone else has additional comment to number one? Oh,
Hi.
Linda.
Okay, going back to Patrick's discussion about targeted streets and the potential for spilling over, and I think you also mentioned this, Christian. I think that's something that if it happens, it's something that will be dealt with if it happens. And we can only speculate at this point how streets are going to be affected by changes in parking. I'm sorry. As far as existing timing for reporting, I think all of those things can be made as suggestions to changes, which may or may not go through the council, but everything can be on the plate. All ideas can be on the plate. I can't read my writing on my third note, but through the chair, I respectfully request that before you ask a question about something else and move on, that you check the dais to see if there's responses to the questions being asked, because I sat here for a long time with my hand up while we went through a couple of other ideas. And I think it's important to brainstorm right now so that all of the ideas on a particular item are recorded. Thank you.
Yeah, yeah. Apologize for not looking on my right, but I have my vice chair who's very, active and letting me know that I needed to get you. Okay, so any more points or observations on point number 1, or should we move on to number 2?
I'll make a few more comments. I'll just say flat out, I happen to like this very much. It's a soft approach, and it gives each block the decision of whether or not they want to have it. Okay, I think that's important. Whatever the program is, that whether it's citywide or block or whatever, that it be decided upon by those that are affected. I think that's very important. And I think just putting up the sign that this has a parking permit required, I think that potentially goes a long way to eliminating the airport parking people, because they will see a permit and they don't know how quickly they don't know how it's enforced. Mm-hmm. So they look at, permit parking only. I don't have a permit. I'm not going to park here. I think that even without any enforcement necessary, I think just having that sign up helps a lot. And so assuming that these streets would have signage, I think that goes a long way. Now, the other problem that we identified of car storage on the streets by residents of the streets, they're going to know. So, but I think this potentially eliminates one of the problems that Brisbane faces, which is the airport parking, without having to do a whole lot of enforcement work, because people don't know for a few years ago, it came out that the BART security cameras were just fake. But for many years, they were very effective, okay? Because people saw the camera, they thought it was a camera. So, that kind of thing can be very effective, I think. So I happen to like this approach.
Anyone else want to shim into that?
Yes, on the question of signage, would that sort of be, because I guess currently, do those streets have any signage? Would we be able to sort of add do we have any thoughts on how signage would work around those 5 streets? I happen to live on Alvarado, and I don't think there are any signs anywhere on Alvarado that I live. So that's why I'm kind of curious how this might look for the purpose of kind of discouraging.
Yeah, if there is a residential parking permit program, you have to have a sign to be able to ticket.
Every street. Everything will some sort of.
Yeah, visible. The deal with parking restrictions is the sign, like when we did ticket for street sweeping on visitation, it has to be visible from every parking place. So it can only be like 150, 250 feet away from that parking place.
So I think before moving on to number 2, I just want to say that, that is a great comment, Pat, and I like it because, there's a lot of people in Brisbane that don't have a parking problem. And I think this 5 targeted street that were, identified is because they do have a targeted problem. So they need to deal with it. So starting with those 5 target streets, it will be a great approach. So let's.
We're going to get this question.
Sure.
So then the blue comments, is that what staff will look into? Or are we going to come back and sort of address these blue later? Or is that something staff would look into for the part 1 and kind of come back in the next cycle with the data in terms of resident numbers and ballot?
So that's a good question because, Linda said we need to do everything, and I agree. But Karen said, some of that staff could do it. So you want to clarify, Karen?
I don't know how. How many residents? You guys could walk on the streets and count, I guess, but we could probably use files that we have.
Tax rolls would have that.
Well,
Right.
it'd be
So
per
we have
household,
that.
right? It'd be per living unit, right?
Yeah.
Per address,
Per address. yeah.
right? So I think we could do that for you. Identify cost to mail ballot based on, again, that's there's paper, there's staff time, envelopes. Do we want to give a stamped, self-addressed, an envelope with a stamp on it to mail it back? Cost to have stickers made. We already looked into that with IPS, and they're $20 to mail a sticker if you use a credit card. I think the credit card fee was going to be $4, so it's $16 to $20 per sticker, per displayed permit, assuming that we use stickers versus hang tags. I think that I understood that was preferred between council members Mackin and Cunningham, because if it's complaint-based, they want it to be visible from a distance for residents, and a hang tag, you know, it would have the license plate number, but you'd have to get closer to it to see that. So yeah, on these three, I think we could do these. Some of this, I agree, some of this is pretty far along, you know, there's not a lot more that needs to be done unless there are more thoughts about the structure of it or challenges or
I do
whatever the
have an
case may be.
additional question. Would we limit the number of permits per residence or would it be just unlimited, or how would that be handled?
Well, I think it's similar to what was proposed before.
Okay.
The two,
The two,
the 2-in-1, except we talked about multi-generational, we talked about work vehicles, and we talked about emergencies.
okay.
So all of that still has to be factored in.
Yeah, so keep in mind, when we go, you know, point by point, you know, it's you know, we don't want to get into the details, but remember a lot of that research that we did, you know, the codified exceptions, working vehicles, you know, a lot of that stuff, we have, you know, we have it in our records. So maybe Tomas could put that other sheet that we worked on, and we could probably get an idea, you know, where we're at with some of the data. Is going to be email as well, and when we go back, you know, he's going to email us the cities that we did, and we might add some other cities, you know, to sort of go over them and make phone calls and research more stuff.
Can I
Sure.
please respond to Karen about the number of permits? It might be something that would be a good ballot question when the ballot's sent out, and see what people are thinking would be a good number of permits. It doesn't necessarily mean we're locked down to it, but to get an opinion from the people that we're mailing to anyway, there's probably going to be several questions other than just, do you want a permit program on your block? I think it needs a little bit of explanation. And I don't know why that couldn't be one of the questions on the ballot.
Wouldn't everybody just respond with how many they needed for their
That's
home?
possible.
What's wrong with that, actually, right?
Well, that's business as usual.
Well, we don't know, but it's fair to ask the question and just see if they're being reasonable, if we think it's reasonable, if what they're asking for we can even handle. I think it's a good question to ask. That's all I'm throwing on the table to the mix of the brainstorm.
Would it be something we want to serve? I mean, we wouldn't want to survey that ourselves potentially, or is that too much sort of?
Well, if it's going to go on a ballot, you know, and we're contacting them that way, I think we should just stick with the directive, identify, send the ballot, and in the ballot include it.
The ballot, I think, is like in, you know, quotes in terms of what, like how much percentage do we need? What happens with that? So I think it's more of a, maybe not like a, well, in this case, I don't think it's a official ballot.
I'm not comfortable with the word ballot so much, but because it's unofficial. It's not a real ballot. It's not like we're voting and it's going to be counted by the state or county. It's feedback in the form of a ballot. And I think that we can ask anything we want, but the main question is, how do you feel about a parking program on your street? And then we can get more details from them. So go ahead, Patrick.
I think that is a good question to add. And maybe, you know, question one, do you or do you not want a parking program on your block? Yes, no. Question two, if there were a parking program on your block, how many blank permits do you need? And let that be a survey, maybe put in there, this is no guarantee you're going to get that many or something, but then we know, the city knows how many permits potentially people are needing. I mean,
Wanting, yeah.
well, yeah. Some may be zero because they are able to park in a garage.
I have a question. How do we find, if we can't identify the number of residents without walking around counting, how do we know who to send ballots to and who?
Oh, the address, that's all postal
Okay, so we can all get all
information.
that information, and so by next meeting, we can know how many residents would be impacted by this 5 streets. Okay, great, yeah. Let's
That's
do
all
that.
census data.
Oh, perfect, okay. And then we know the cost of ballots and that, okay.
The only question I have, there have to be some sort of distinguish if you're voting or something versus a survey, because you might be giving false hope. Just a general question, like if you're saying we are going to have a parking permit program, or you're going to be voting for a parking permit program in your block, and this is the criteria how it's going to be run, and then underneath you're going to have all the survey questions. Is going to be confusing.
I don't think we're going to tell them how it's going to be run. I think the most important question is, would you like a parking permit program on your street? And then sub-questions would be, if so, how many permits per household do you think is reasonable? And I'm sure there's other questions that we'll come up with later, but I don't think it's a legal vote. We're asking for feedback and calling it a vote because it's like taking a survey.
Well, but it is enacting conditions where someone could get a ticket. So I think it kind of does become a vote,
That's
right?
their response to the main question.
Right,
Is,
right,
do you
right,
even
right.
want the program? And, they could get a ticket if they agree or the majority agrees and the council decides to proceed. And there is a parking program on that. If they don't pay attention to how it's set up, they probably will get a ticket.
Mm-hmm.
And it's well-deserved. It's not like they didn't know.
Those are very good question, and obviously, honestly, that's above my pay grade. Maybe is that something you could probably circle back staff to council and get more clarification on that?
I was going to suggest the Linda draft, the questions, the Linda draft.
The questions for the ballot.
Yeah, and I heard a difference between, I heard what you said. What do you think is appropriate for the parking permit program on your block? How many? And Patrick said, how many do you want? Those are two different things.
Yes, they are.
Yeah.
Well, we could ask both questions.
Right.
Yeah.
Independent.
And I'd be happy to do that. If you guys help me, I'll just keep a list.
I think that the committee could review it, and that would be an appendix to what staff brings to council.
Yeah.
Independent of the ballot itself or the voting process, we have to have public outreach to each block, if not citywide. Hey, this is what's happening. These are the streets, or your street. Hey, folks on Tulare or whatever, this is what's going on your street. No different than when PG&E is going to come in and do all kinds of wire work on a particular street. They give public notice. And I think Brisbane's very good at having public awareness, public education things. We are a small city. We all do kind of know each other. I think our citizens keep abreast of things, pretty well. But I think that has to happen independent of the physical ballot
through
paper.
the blast or the star, letting the entire community know that there is a program on these particular streets. And if we have signage, if it goes forward and we have signage, then people are going to know.
Yes.
To begin with, these are the streets that we were given. And I think we should stick to that. And then if we see that it's successful and the council sees it's successful and they want to go further with it, I think that probably will be our next job.
Would it be possible to get a map of these streets and sort of highlighted of where they are in Brisbane and how it sort of looks? Because I'm not even sure I know sort of how connected they are for the next time and sort of the numbers of residents on them. Is that something that could be part of the report, or I guess, yeah.
Yeah, it's easy enough. Yeah, sure.
Thank you.
Yeah, that's what San Mateo had, which I thought it was very cool when you go into website, and so you click the map where the streets that have parking permit program and you click it and it tells you right there. So that would be cool if we do that for Brisbane too, similar to the safe route, something like that.
If I could, as I look at these, earlier I talked about spillover to other streets, but as I think more about many of these streets, Tulare, Kings, Humboldt, they're kind of long, isolated streets high up the mountain with not a lot of cross streets. So if you're going to park on a different street, you're going to walk a long ways up a hill, most likely. So maybe that's not a problem, you know?
That's a good point.
It's not like San Francisco where you can go to the corner and around the block or 2 blocks over and it's a short walk back, easy walk back.
Yeah, that is a good point. And I think those streets don't have buildings either, you know, because that could also compound problems where you have a building that has like 10 units and half of those people are parking on the street, so to speak.
Except for Alvarado Street, we're talking about Alvarado all the way across. There are a couple multi-units on the corner there. Yeah. Well,
Okay, so can we move on to number 2? Sounds like a yes. Would you like to read number 2, Darius?
LAS program, citywide 24-hour program, 8 a.m. to 5 p.m. with enforcement by LAS and citations after 24 hours. Vehicles without permits must be physically moved every 24 hours. Downside, substantial cost for program. Advantage, stringent and reliable enforcement, elimination of extra cars, commercial vehicles, and airport parkers. And in blue, the question is to identify basic costs for 8 to 5 LAS enforcement and additional costs for other services.
And we just
you for that.
recently got that feedback from LAS that they would do a year for $52,000 a year
Just on those streets.
on those. Oh, take that back. That was on the 2.3 miles. So we're going to have to go back to them to do all of the streets if we're talking about in the daytime. We know that at night it was the full-time person that was 127,000. Probably somewhere in between.
I'm confused.
At night, to have LAS enforce overnight when we wanted the program to be between 10 p.m. and 6 a.m., their cost for one full-time employee was $127,000. I don't have the cost to do between 8 and 5.
Okay.
Somewhere between 52 and 127. We did not ask that yet.
Okay. But the 52 applies to
The
these,
targeted streets.
all of them. I'm not sure where the 2.3 miles comes.
The 5 targeted streets are 2.3 miles in length total. I wanted to give them that so that they could give us a good estimate.
Okay.
That's a lot of money for just a few streets.
Yeah, and remember they said they need to come up from San Mateo. So they had originally told us they thought they had a 6-hour minimum, but when I communicated with them, they said they're going to start a program in San Bruno, so they might be able to kind of share resources. So I think it's probably a 4-hour minimum.
Well, the only directive on this one is to identify the basic cost for 8 to 5 LAS enforcement and additional costs for other services. So that's easily answered. And then if there's additional stuff that we brainstorm up here on the dais, we can add that.
So Linda, we're going to do the same that we did in number 1, and this time we're going to start with Pat. What is your when you look at number 2 and you read it, what do you think about it? What would you like to discuss?
Okay. The first thing that jumps out at me is if the city wants an ironclad, strictly enforced program, this provides that regardless of what time. It doesn't matter what time of day that they're coming through. It sees a car that doesn't have a permit by reading the license plate. The citation is issued. Done. There's no leeway whatsoever. So it's a matter of what the city wants, and their advantage to that, if the parking is truly severe and is caused by outside people or car storage, outside people that are using this for airport parking or car storage, then this, I think, will eliminate that very quickly without question. But that comes at a cost, which is strict enforcement, and that will capture, I think, people, a lot of innocent people unintentionally. Okay? Somebody who's gone to visits, or somebody who had their kid come home from college for the summer or forgot to get a permit, things like that. So those are the main thoughts that I have at the moment. I'm sure as we talk more, things will come up in my mind.
Thank you for that, Darius.
I mean, I agree. I think this is probably the most strict sort of program, but it's also the most unbiased, which I think I like that aspect of it. But regardless, I think this is an easy one in terms of figuring out the next answers because staff can probably find that. I guess I did have a question regarding sort of the 5 streets. What percent of Brisbane would that be kind of deal? Looking at the map, it does seem like quite a lot. And so maybe, yeah, I'd be curious if that, to point number 1, so I bring that back up. But, looking at the map, it does seem like that those 5 streets cover quite a lot. And so I'd be curious what percent versus the rest. But that might also come up in the cost once we figure out sort of the overall cost. But no other comments at this time.
Karen can address that.
The 2.3 miles are centerline miles, so not counting, like a Bayshore is 4 lanes, just counting that as centerline miles, we have 22, so it's 10% of all the streets in the city limits.
That includes the original.
Yes, yep.
For Central Brisbane, do you happen to know what, like the part that we consider for the parking permit, what part would that can be?
I might be able to look it up, but I don't remember. Maybe, no, I don't know.
Gregory?
I think this is as Patrick was kind of saying with the last with this program, it's kind of the other option, right? If whether we go with the complaint-based system, which I'm glad we got more clarification on what that means, because that definitely helps, especially I started thinking that 72-hour rule thing too. But if it's not there, if it's complaint-driven. But in this case, this is the other option that we came up with pretty much last time, which was instead of doing evenings, doing the 8 to 5, and 1 time a day allows comes through. And if you don't have the permit, you get the ticket at that time. But again, the cost is a big factor.
Thank you for that. Linda?
I guess my question is to staff. The first thing I have to say is additional cost. Does that include permits that LAS would issue, or is there an additional cost for the permit, whatever kind of permit they read to the city or to the consumer?
In my conversation with Councilmember Mack, and I'll admit it wasn't clear if the liaisons kind of wanted to see if we could issue permits in-house. Staff feels strongly that you want a consultant that has expertise, that has a database already built, that it's a lot cheaper. So the one that we investigated, IPS, parking systems, integrated parking systems, $5,000 to set up your program one time, $16 to $20 to issue the permit, and then it's all there. You get the database, you get the software, it's done. So to have staff do it, we could come up with something. I doubt it would be as cheap because you'd have to develop a database and you'd have the whole, customer relationship management. It's going to be a lot more expensive to reinvent that.
Yeah, I know, and I wasn't asking that. It was simply that whether the patrol costs, I guess we can call it that, by LAS, and then the actual physical permit, if it's necessary, if there's an additional cost for that, and who would bear it.
Yeah, LAS doesn't do that, but they work together with IPS in other cities where they do enforcement. Who would bear it? You guys recommended that the city council bear the cost the first year. So that's still for them to decide, I guess.
Exactly. And I just want to finish by saying LAS sounds like an amazing program. And again, the costs are so high, I think it's prohibitive at this time. So I'm not in favor of it, but we do just need to identify the basic costs. And if anybody has anything they want to add to that, just send it back to the council.
Thank you, Linda. I think the positive thing would be having Commander Garcia's guys be more focused on, other type of, policing work rather than, giving people citation, and at times that could go far away, because we all know that combating crime and et cetera is definitely a critical thing. But other than that, I do agree. It's going to be a very strict. Agree with with the rest of the committee that it's going to be a stricter program, expensive. You're going to have a lot of casualty people, and maybe right now one way to look at it is the illness might not be that critical to have some sort of efficacy at this level. So it might not be the proper remedy for what we are encountering. So I just don't think it's probably a good option for Brisbane.
We still need to do the work.
Oh yeah, most definitely. We're going to go ahead and research it more, get more cost, and get it tighter, just to make sure we have all the data points. So moving on to point number 3, it's 7:40. Gregory, would you like to read it?
Sure. Point number 3, sticker program, limited number permits issued to residents for personal vehicles. Stickers equals any visible permit making neighbor enforcement requests possible. There's a limited number of permits for work vehicle, no large trucks or oversized vehicles at additional cost. Short-term permits available, case-by-case basis. Duration depending on situation. Complaint-based resident reporting with enforcement by BPD, utilizing license plate readers enhancement. Citations after 48 to 72 hours on non-permitted vehicles. Downside, limited enforcement logistics of annual renewal. And advantage, elimination of extra cars, extra commercial vehicles, and airport parkers. In blue, things that as a community we have to do is identify the cost to have stickers made on an annual basis. And is there more to that? No, okay.
Okay. So I guess we're gonna, can you, Gregory, can you give us your feedback when, when you look at point number 3, what do you think of it?
So I guess my initial question is trying to identify the difference between this one with this. So this one would be for the entire Central Brisbane? Is that the difference that they're?
That's my understanding.
Okay,
Yeah.
versus the 5 streets.
Right.
Okay. Otherwise, it's the same thought process with the complaint-based driven stickers, things like that, right?
The enforcement being complaint-based, we were just saying among staff that we were a little bit, I didn't pick this up when I talked to Councilmember Mackin, but a little bit confused about citations after 48 to 72 hours on non-permitted.
Yeah.
Is that the original proposal was 24 hours. After 24 hours, it seems like what she suggested kind of went in a little different direction from what we proposed originally, because with the 24-hour, that takes 2 looks at a car, but it allows guests or visitors to have 24 hours to come and visit and be around in an emergency or non-emergency and park and not really have to go through a administrative process. So I admit I'm a little bit confused about the timing of this and then the difference from what you guys proposed before.
I guess I have a question, if I might. The same conditions that people visiting and such would apply to the targeted streets, right?
Say that again?
So this issue of 24 hours to allow people to come visit without repercussion and administrative burden to issue a permit for a short-term visitor, say, say up to 24 or 48 hours, but we're not applying, that's suggested to apply it to the citywide program, but not to the targeted streets program, if I understand the
I mean,
target.
as it's written, it kind of doesn't make sense, does it? And then
Right.
going back to what Commander Garcia said about they're not able to do 2 visits to enforce.
Correct. So again, these are 2 separate programs. If you're going complaint-based, a lot of these rules get thrown out versus you're going with LAS. LAS, I think, I don't know if this is what I'm thinking is, when this was presented to council, there was the question of, well, someone's visiting at 2 at night because I fell or whatever, they're here between 2 and 6 in the morning, and you guys come by at 5 in the morning, they're gonna get tagged. Well, I don't know if LAS can do this or not, but if LAS comes through on 2 passes, on the first pass, they read a license plate and it's not in the system, it would queue. On the second pass, maybe 10 hours later, 12 hours later, depending on when the second pass would be, if that vehicle is still in the same spot and it's in that queue, then it would get issued a citation. Because then that would alleviate if someone came over for 6 hours or 5 hours to either house sit or whatever it may be, that they don't have to get a permit every single time. So I think that could be maybe how this is being addressed, and that would simply address short-term, like 10-hour emergency visitors. But please keep in mind, complaint-based and these systems are completely 2 separate houses. They don't live together. So I hope that clarifies anything that maybe this needs.
Okay, thank you.
So I guess, is it our understanding then that number 3 is also a complaint-based? Because I'm confused. I guess I'm a little confused with the reporting by license plate reader enhancement piece.
So let me put this out there. If this is a city-wide, then I'm not going to advocate a complaint base, because that 10 vehicles for how many streets can go to 30 at night. And then this program would fail if we got an influx of 20 complaints or 30 a night, because we couldn't all get there at one time. Maybe we can get 3 vehicles before we get the next call, and then that would tie us up for, 10 hours. So I think if you're going to go all in, it's all in versus all in, and then we're still going to use the police department. We do not have that bandwidth. We can handle maybe 5 streets, depending on how much time is needed there. Again, that would give us the ability to address the problem within our minimum time of response, 6 minutes to maybe like a couple hours. But if it's all in, I would not advocate the complaint base with that.
Yeah, I think those 2 things are at odds with each other. Sticker program and license plate reader enhancement. So, and I think Councilmember Mackin asked you about license plate readers, but that was kind of in the midst of her research before she sent this to staff. So I think maybe she was thinking that would facilitate you guys doing complaint-based enforcement, but it kind of...
It was, and that was we did have to clarify that, because we, I think, had mentioned and somehow got to Councilmember Mackin that we have this new digital citing system that allows us to populate the license plate on the citation system by simply pointing a proprietary camera that we have attached to our digital citation system at the car. That does not expedite a complaint base at all. It literally just gives us the ability, instead of typing out what the license plate is, you point it at the license plate and it reads it. And I clarified that with her, I believe, and I think we were good there.
Sure, Pat.
Sorry. If number 3 were completely complaint-based, like number 1, but citywide, would Brisbane Police be able to handle it at that level, do you think? Or would that still be an undue burden on the department?
Absolutely. We could not handle citywide complaint basically. It would still have to go to a third party like LAS.
Okay.
And I don't believe LAS can do, hey, we got 10 calls tonight versus the next night we get 20 calls. I don't think they can do that.
Okay. Thank you.
So I wonder if
Go ahead, Linda.
the council did, sorry,
Go ahead, Karen.
say, look, we don't want to pay for LAS. We want a complaint-based system. We understand you're not going to respond to all of them. I mean, that seems problematic to me. if you get 30 complaints and you can only go address 5 to 10, people are going to be frustrated, I would think.
Initially, I think they'll be frustrated, and initially you probably will get more calls. But as the program continues, I have a feeling it'll all fall into place. And understandably, you can't go out there and police this all the time, and that's not expected of you. I'm wondering if the reason Councilmember Mackin brought the plate reader up as enhancement was because you can read the plate and have it print out on your ticket that you're going to issue, or your warning, or whatever prints out on. I understand you have a printer that will print out new tickets. If that's just the way to enhance it, is to use that. It saves time writing the ticket. And I had other notes here, but it's after a while you kind of forget. One of the things that crossed my mind when we were talking about stickers and people coming in like on a regular, like medical people dealing with someone who's at home and in care, I'm wondering if we could have a different type of a permit issued that they could hang on their mirror for when they show up and do what services they're providing in Brisbane and leave, and then that would be just
Routine
obvious.
or emergency?
Well, routine, like when someone's in hospice and they have someone coming every day, or several people, or family. If there was a situation like that, then, just a special little placard they could put over their mirror or in their windshield would alert everyone that, this isn't a regular parker that's going to stay there overnight, unless it's the last day or something and they need to stay. There's obviously some different things that can be done, but I think that we need to suggest some ways to deal with that. The occasional parkers, the medical parkers, that sort of thing. There's a lot of little things in this that I think we need to put our heads to look at what the occasional thing that's not going to work with that is going to be, and how we would recommend dealing with it. Nothing that we submit to council may be accepted at all, but I think as a committee, in order to do the very best job we can, we need to look at the things that we're discussing and add those to whatever the report is back to council as a legitimate thing that we're looking at. And this is how we would suggest it could possibly be handled.
Yeah, and we had talked about guest parking. I actually looked at the city of Chicago, which Patrick had referenced, and they have do an application online for that guest permit. And sure, maybe it's once a week or once a day for X months. When we brought it to council, said the committee didn't define those parameters, but there is a guest system. But their question that they came back with was, what about those emergencies? You don't have time to go online and register and create a login and put all your information in and get a placard sent to you in an emergency situation. So it deals with some of it, and I think the committee had this idea about doing that, but it doesn't deal with those emergencies. So that's still out there to be.
What kind of emergency, for example, would you be referring to?
I fell and I need, my mom fell and I need to go and feed her dinner or go and rescue her, or,
Well, rescuers is.
No, I mean, as a family member, not the fire department.
No, exactly. I understand what you're saying. Initially, if it was explained, they probably shouldn't get a ticket. I mean, there should be some discretion there. And who's going to?
We talked about at council that anyone could appeal the ticket through staff, but they're not going to go to the last meter maid and say, look, my mom fell, don't write a ticket. We don't want it to be done that way if you're using.
Right.
But it's something that I think that was discussed at the council meeting. Like, it could be appealed and it would be overturned if you had a justified emergency.
Right. And then if they became a caretaker full-time, I don't see why something like a handicap placard couldn't be issued to the people that come in to take care of people daily and then leave at some point.
Yeah, I agree. I thought we'd kind of work through that, and I thought we had presented, well, I guess the emergency thing hadn't been really talked about in depth when it was presented to council.
So I think, for the sake of time, somebody wants to remind me what, usually what's the time the meeting ends?
I think we should get through this tonight.
Yeah, I know, but just need to know what time does the meeting end?
8 is the target.
8 is the target?
8 is the target, but it's not official. I set that as a target when I was chair for the first time because people work. But because of the importance of this and the timeliness of it, if we can get through the rest of, I don't know how many more pages we have or how much is left to look at, but if we can get through it with everyone agreeing to keep going, then I'd like to see us
Okay,
continue.
so Linda, just to clarify, I am the chair, and I just sort of want to have a better understanding on the time. Yeah, definitely. I feel if everybody's okay, we could go longer. But at the same time, now that we're talking on the last point, and you and Karen are getting more into the details, it's probably a good time to present, start talking about the next phase, which is going to be when we go home, what, the research that we're going to do, some of the documents that we put in place to help us use as a reservoir for the data that we have collected and keep adding on it. So should we go ahead and get into the section now?
Hey, Christian, I'm sorry to interrupt. There's an attendee who had their hand raised. Would it be all right if they speak now?
Oh,
Of course,
that would come
yes.
under oral communications, wouldn't it?
No, it's about the item we're discussing. Do you wish to take public comment?
Do we have a
I
second
think
oral
yes.
communications?
Okay, let's see. All right, Chris, I think you should be able to speak now. You're unmuted. And
Hi there, can you hear me?
Yes.
Great, yes, this is Chris Florkowski. I have been listening and I couldn't see the spot where public comment is allowed in the agenda. So I waited until what seemed like the end. My question is, do we have a vision for the city of Brisbane? How can we evaluate such things as this parking permit question, which is taking an enormous amount of time? I think far too much time. Some questions should be delivered to staff offline if you've read the document before the meeting and get those answers so that staff has an opportunity to get the answers back to you. Do we really want to affirm car dominance in this city, which is what we presently have, except up on the ridge? Or do we want to find a way to restore our sidewalks so that pedestrians do not have to walk in the street? It's very dangerous to walk in the older part of town here at night, let me tell you. Could we even consider setting the price for a permit that's based on the size of the vehicle so that bigger vehicles, which take up more parking space, room, actually have to pay for that? We've gotten so used to the car dominance here, we haven't even noticed that it's getting worse. Vehicles are bigger and bigger and higher, which makes visibility very difficult. Trying to see if there's oncoming traffic at times because of the vehicles that are parked at the corner is really challenging. You have to pull out into the intersection in order to see. Work vehicle permits should require being associated with a business license here in Brisbane. I don't think we should give permits to business vehicles that are not. So again, what is the vision? What do we want Brisbane to look and to feel like? And a specific note about putting up the signs and not releasing permits. That might last for a month. All an airport parker would have to do is take a look at the cars that are parked on the street and see if there are any permits. they'll quickly figure out that it's a ruse. And if we do poll the residents and ask about the number of permits they'd like to have, what will you do when the total number of permits requested exceed the available parking in that area by a significant number? That might tell you that we may simply have too many cars and that we need to figure out ways to address that. That's all I have to say right now.
Chris, thank you so much for your participation and your comments. I'm going to open up your comments to the rest of the committee, but I will say this: this is a program that council feels is very critical, and I know it's we just request more patience from the residents. We're almost there. There are some streets that they are facing, challenges with the parking, and we want to address that. But at the same time, we understand your frustration, and we also need to work on other, aspect of the town as you're suggesting. Anyone else? Any other comment?
I have one for the committee members. If you have questions for staff, you're free to email those, but as you know, because of the California Brown Act, you're discouraged or not allowed to have discussions through email that aren't public, that the public can't witness and be part of. So if you have questions about some of these particular items, you can email staff, but we discourage or prohibit the discussion in between meetings. That's what these meetings are for. It makes them longer, but it allows the public to know what you're doing as you process these issues.
I have no comments, but I appreciate that they were made, the caller.
Anyone else?
Yes, we have a protocol to follow, and I think we should stick to it. I think generally speaking, we did have public input at the beginning of the meeting. Council meeting has a second one, we don't. So it's good to listen to what people have to say, but I don't know that we can respond immediately. And we are working at the pleasure of the council with the items that they have given us to look at. And I think that there were a lot of good comments by the speaker that called in. I just, I don't know that we can really address anything at this point. We have a job.
Well, I'm not necessarily, looking for for concrete answers. I just wanted, a general comment of Chris' comments. As a resident, we look forward to have the community, to feel free and make their comments as well. But I understand that the meeting does have a structure. We didn't have anybody participating at the beginning, but now she came in and it was totally fine to hear her out.
I agree 100%. This is the first time that we as a group are looking at this document and working through it. So we might have more answers later. But we're just now getting to the nuts and bolts of it and trying to figure out which way we're gonna respond. So, and I do appreciate public comment. I really do. It's important.
Sounds good. Okay, so I think we should probably keep moving on. What I was saying earlier is, as Karen, I'm sorry, go ahead, Pat.
I just wanted to make some comments. We're still on number 3, right? Are we still discussing?
Yes, number 3.
Okay. What I like about this as a program is that it is complaint-based. And I realize the difficulty for Brisbane police to respond and enforce this. And maybe there's some other way between do-it-yourself as a city and LAS that allows somehow this to occur that we could recommend. I don't know what that might be. But it would, it's very similar to the Targeted Streets program. It's just rolled out citywide. One of the things that is nice about the Targeted Streets program, as compared to a LAS type program is that everybody on their block kind of knows what's going on. They know the resident of house, whatever, needs, somebody comes in and helps them every day at 5 p.m. They know that person's there. That person doesn't have to go get a permit because it will not generate a complaint. They know that that person will be there an hour or whatever and then leave, because we all kind of know what our neighbors are kind of doing. You know, we know their habits. And for that reason, I like both number 1 and number 3, okay? The difficulty, while number 1, on targeted streets, a sticker program can be enforced by Brisbane Police with current resources. We understand it. Number 3 could not be. So we need to find another way that could be done without having LAS do it, because I understand that LAS could not necessarily respond to it either on a complaint-based program. Just.
Any other additional comments?
I guess, how are we summarizing all? Because I think this is a really important point that, for example, Brisbane PD cannot handle this as it is currently written, and that needs to be explicitly, stated, and maybe there's some cost, maybe LAS can. So is this something that staff is compiling, I guess, and we get like a follow-on report next time? How do we sort of compile all this to, have these answers?
Yeah, so that's a good point. So I think, I guess now we could probably move on for number 3 and sort of talk about the next phase, which is we do have, Thomas, if you want to put the, so we did compile all the different reports that we have, created together and submitted to Council. And we also have a spreadsheet that we have per category, putting what we have landed on, and we're just going to, keep adding on to that. My guess is that, staff is going to give us the cities that we research and might add some other cities. Now, after the discussion that we have, to fill in the blanks, to go to more surgical on those specific needs the council has. And then we're going to be putting them in this spreadsheet. So the first, for example, the first, like you see it on the screen, the first category that we have is the area zone coverage, right? So we're covering Central Brisbane, we're excluding visitation, Crocker Park, and Bayshore. Now we're also doing the targeted street, right? An existing program area may be expanded, removed, or modified per program development and program remove or so basically what we're saying is that we're going to suggest to council, or we're going to put in the report if there is spill from the other streets, the other citizens could get together and this could be expanded or council could be expanded. And then we go into enforcement, So enforcement, we have existing ordinance, Brisbane Police Department, contracted with Lance, and we're going to keep filling that in. Go lower. And then we have permit parking management. Obtaining a parking permit is purely optional. However, residents still need to comply with the posted parking restrictions. So, for example, on a street, the residents, this is an option for them to do, but they have to comply with the program, right? And then in terms of the application, they need to be resident of Brisbane. They need to be have a license and a registration of the car in order to issue a permit. Last time we landed that we're going to issue 2 permits. So this document is going to share with us. We're going to look at it. You have any comments on those things that we have accumulated over the time? If you want to add more, we could go ahead and add more. And then can you also show them all the different documents that we have done, the PDF?
Can I ask a question?
Sure.
Before you move on? Obtaining a parking permit is purely optional. How does that work?
This is just a suggestion. So when we come back, we could say somebody has the option to obtain a parking permit or don't, but nevertheless, you have to comply with the
I think-
program, because you could have your car in the garage, right?
Right, and I was going to say, I thought it was your example, Linda. You don't need one to park on the street. You just can't park on the street if you don't have a permit, but if you never park on the street, you don't need to pay $20.
Okay, that could be clarified a little bit better then, that optional, if these circumstances exist, maybe. I just
Yeah,
got
I think there's a
really,
bit to do with this.
I got really confused when I read that, and we're hopping into a screen that I've never seen before and trying to follow along.
I think Kristen's just outlining it for further work you're going to do at the next meeting, yeah?
Are not recommendations, but just investigations. Not like the last page that was submitted in June, where it was.
I think he's trying to structure the three options, like which of these conditions apply to each of the three options that our liaisons came up with, right?
Yeah, it's mainly like a cheat sheet. A lot of it is stuff that we had already landed on, but as you know, council has come back to us. So some of the stuff that we thought, we had agreed, now they have a question mark. But everybody's going to have the opportunity, we're going to have the opportunity to discuss or comment on those things. But it's going to be something that we're going to be accumulating in a more organized what we have been doing, and also compare it to the different reports that they have been presented to council, and we're going to be reaching out to the different cities.
I guess on this doc, is the expectation then to add actual costs and numbers here? Or is this sort of just an overview? Because like for this section, they're all the same here, I guess. So how do we sort of differentiate that amongst them? Is there a different document for that, or or is that something staff puts together? I guess what are we thinking here?
So for instance, we're going to have here some of the numbers that Karen is going to bring to us in terms of the last cost. The other things that we don't have cost, we're going to have a blank. If we cannot get cost, then we could either delete it or just have it there as a placeholder that we do need to have cost, or we need to make some sort of reference why we didn't get cost.
Can you
I think I'd
explain the
like to-
columns with the colors and the dots, how that works for us?
So that's the three categories that we've been working on: targeted street permit program. So some of these points on the left are more directly to those, and some of them, they overlap.
Oh, okay, so I see, I understand now. Thank you.
Yeah.
Comment? Since we're seeing this for the first time, I like this because it summarizes, essentially the last program, it was our last proposal to council, and then we're adding the two additional ones. This helps summarize, but I'd like to look at it with more time.
So this is going to be emailed by Tomas.
Okay.
And also he's going to, email us the cities that we need to research again, and a PDF or all the different reports that we have provided to the to council. So when we sit down and do this work, we have reference to go back and forth.
Okay. Thank you.
And is that work we're doing between now and the next meeting, or is that work we do at the next, or what work?
That's a good question for Karen, because she, like I said, she was the one that had met with Colleen, and this is now a good time to bring questions about schedule and time frame. And also, Linda had a question earlier about the ballot. When is that expected to do, or do we have any deadlines?
If you have any ideas, maybe you could forward them to Karen, and then she can forward them to me. And I'll try to come up with the questions for the ballot to the best of my ability.
Oh, the ballot for the targeted streets,
Yes,
ballot.
the ballot.
The survey ballot feedback form, whatever we're
Right.
calling it.
So basically, Karen, we want to work based on priority. So let's say if if they want to move quickly with the ballots, maybe we want to work on that. But overall, what was your take from Colleen in terms of when do we need to get this done?
Well, in my discussion with Councilmember Mackin, I said, we'd gotten her memo only shortly before last Friday when we sent it out to you guys and with the agenda. And I said, I don't expect the committee to be done with their research in one meeting. So it's going to take at least another. She indicated that they're going to have a lot of backlog in September because they didn't meet over the summer, and that October was fine, for example, to bring it to council. So in response to what Darius asked, I'm not exactly sure how I'm going to structure the council agenda report at this point, but she did say she wanted the big concepts in their agenda report with the attachments, the appendix being the details, not to bog the 5 council members down on details of like, how do you verify your residency and, how many homes are on that block? That'll be in the appendix. They'll read it before the meeting. So, yeah, I think the council is going to decide whether we do the survey also to those 5 targeted streets, because they may say, you know what, no, we all want to do a citywide program. Let's put it to an official vote on the county ballot. I don't know. I think they want to decide between those options. So we don't need to have a ballot for the targeted streets or ballot right away. We're preparing all of our research for staff to take to council with you guys assisting. And I apologize. I thought when you came to the meeting, they were going to ask you questions and involve you more, but I would love to have committee members come to that meeting again in case we have a different discussion. It was late in the night. It took a long time. Maybe they didn't want to engage as much as give us their direction. But so I imagine that we're going to collect the information, do the research at the other cities, and staff's going to put something together and bring it to council. And that's going to decide whether there's more to do on targeted streets, on citywide, any of these options that we're reviewing and researching for them.
So you're saying most likely October, we should be having something to present to them.
Yeah, but I think on your end, if the committee if we can wrap up discussions in September, it's still going to take time to put it together. And we have to find a point. And I think she made the point, like, please don't put it on a really busy agenda.
Mm-hmm.
Right.
May I ask a question of you, Karen? When we submitted our last report to the council was it May?
They reviewed it in April.
April, okay. Was there a document or a list of notes or a package of notes that you had regarding the report that you were going to present to the council? And if so, is it possible for us to get those notes to look back at all the work that we have done and how this may fit in with that or not fit in with it, the new work assignment?
Are you going to be disappointed if I said, having been through all the details with you guys, I might have just winged it from my knowledge? I don't think I have. I might have like a really short bullet list I can go back, but I don't think I have.
If you could send a
extensive.
bullet list, if it's something I want to look at particularly or get more information on, I'm sure it's in our minutes somewhere.
Yeah, so I think in terms of what to present to staff, like I said, there's a document that has a compilation of all the different reports in terms of what to present to council. Staff has, drafted all these documents with our input, and that has been compilated in a PDF file that we could reference. But also, I think if you could click on the San Mateo report, Thomas, this is one thing that I wanted to share with you guys. Is that the actual document, the other one?
I don't have that one ready. Give me 1 second.
Sure. So San Mateo has this very nice report. It's 12 pages. And then what we could probably do is, because obviously they want an executive summary, but then they're going to have, the different details. So, is that it?
I mean, we can just circulate it with everything else.
Yeah.
Once we have it all together, but yeah, we'll reference it.
Thank you. So any more questions on, moving forward, the research phase, and the stuff that Tomas is going to email. And obviously, if you have questions, you could email Tomas. And
I do have to. I'm still unclear. Do we have a deadline for when we need to complete as a committee in order for staff to have time to get things to council? I'm not clear on that.
Also, how are you going to divide and conquer between the other cities that do residential programs? We did that before where we split up. Different people took different cities.
Do we have any cities identified that could be split up for phone calls and more research?
Well, I think we know San Mateo, National City, Beverly Hills.
I think San Bruno has a parking permit program also.
They're getting it off the ground, but.
Oh, okay. Menlo Park,
Sausalito.
Mill Valley.
Anyone recall the questions we asked? I remember there was a list of questions we were supposed to all research. So we
I don't
those
have that in
documents.
front of me
Yeah.
here.
And we can find.
Okay.
they're there, right? Can you put that those questions on the screen?
Well,
I think it's at the end.
so are we going to be calling the cities this time? Is that the plan?
I think it's recommended, yes.
Okay.
Yeah, that one.
All right. And I'm still I'm still unclear as to when we, as a committee, need to be looking at getting our work completed to allow staff time
Well,
to get to present it to council.
one way I'm looking at it is council liaisons have said this is the priority. So if you guys don't have research at the next meeting, we don't have any, they don't want us to start another topic.
I understand that, but a deadline doesn't exist unless there's a date to it.
We don't have a date.
I don't have an agenda because I've been asked to put it on one that's not busy and they're not all set for October at this point, but
Okay.
I had suggested that we could probably, what I said was I don't think the committee's going to be done in August, so we'll likely
Right.
be doing it in September. It makes sense that we could bring it to you in October. That's as specific
Okay, October.
as the
Okay.
discussion was.
Okay.
Is that something you can confirm with them, to have, because it's always good to work out of a deadline rather than
Again, I can't
procrastinate
promise
on
you what deadline it'll be put on because the mayor decides what's on the agenda each time. So we'll propose it. If we're ready, we propose it for October. They decide, she or they decide. If not, it could get pushed to November. But I guess we should work towards trying to bring it to
Sooner.
one of the two
Yeah.
meetings in October.
I think the only thing I'm left with before we adjourn would be to understand what each of us needs to be doing before the next meeting so we don't come back and sit here and with nothing new to move into and work
I
on
agree.
as a committee. And I'm not sure what the next step is, so put that back in the chair's hands.
Yeah, so I mean, so Tomas is going to be circulating the document that we just reviewed, and that document has a lot of, data that we have accumulated, throughout this process. And you could add on to that, you're going to be also be giving cities to research, and those are going to be more. So now these questions are going to be more targeted based on that memo that the current, that we reviewed today. And we're also going to have a reference of the like the document that we see right now. That's the document that we had all the different questions. Remember when we gave all those cities to research. So we're gonna be giving like cheat sheets to go back and forth, sort of like build back better. Don't build from what we had, and just more targeted now with the new memo.
So, for example, what am I doing this month to help the committee?
So
still not clear.
you will read the spreadsheet. If things doesn't make sense to you, feel free to comment on that. Then you're going to be giving a couple of cities, and then if you recall from the memo, there might be questions about the stickers. What problems have you, if you called one of those cities, what problem have you encountered with stickers? There's actually a section that we have over there, surveillance, parking, system versus sticker system. Like stickers, they damage. If you sell your car, you're gonna have to request one. They could be counterfeited. That type of stuff. And so you.
Good questions are, but I don't know that we're going to remember them all. Can you send us a letter with those questions included so that we know what you're looking for or what we are looking for?
I guess we could look at those questions that we did before, maybe refine them. Is that something the staff could work with us to resubmit? But like I said, it needs to be more targeted to the memo, because that's where we're at right now.
What I saw from the memo from Councilmember Mackin working with Cunningham was that they wanted us to not reinvent the wheel, but go back to the other cities that have programs and find out how they dealt, and in my conversation with her too, how the other cities dealt with multi-generational families, work vehicles, and emergencies in particular. And Tomas had suggested that he could assign a city to each of you, just in the email, if that would be easier.
Is the list of cities the same that we did before?
No, I think we found a few new ones that have, because a lot of the ones that we did before were commercial business districts and sort of didn't apply. So we found some that are residential that might be a little more
So
fruitful.
you could send us just a list. You're doing these, and here are the questions to ask.
Yeah, it may only be one each. I don't
Or
think
these are
there
the
were a lot of-
topics to cover, multi-generational, et cetera, et cetera. Okay.
I'd like to be excused from working on a city while I work on the ballot questions. If that's all right with everybody. I'm going to be doing some research on how to even formulate a ballot question and what kinds of questions. So I'm not sure how much time and research that's going to take to come up with intelligent questions that will really bring us back some information. I hope I can do that.
So as one of the things that Colleen expressed is, let's not do subcommittee. I know that's not going to be a subcommittee, but everybody's going to sort of work on the same thing and to bring into the discussion. I think what Karen was saying about the ballots, we're not there yet.
I've been volunteered to come up with the ballot questions.
But by no means, definitely you could do that.
Definitely I could do that. And I already started researching the cities, and then that was not going to be happening at our last meeting. So I don't have that information, and I really don't want to go look for it again or do that part. I would prefer to work on forwarding this part of it, if that's all right with the committee.
I mean, that's all right with me. If any other committee member has a different opinion.
How many cities are we talking about looking at?
Not very many, just like 1 or 2 each, not 3 or 4 like last time.
Is it going to cause a problem if I work on the ballot?
Not at all for me, no.
All right. I would like to do that. I would like to pay some really good attention to the ballot.
Sounds good.
Can I make a suggestion? I don't know if this was already answered in the survey you guys took with the cities, but I know we're trying not to reinvent the wheel, but a complaint-based program is very different. These cities, when you guys get to the liaisons over these cities, can ascertain how they enforce it and how they measure the effectiveness of the program. Because effectively, you could literally put a street on a permit program. Everyone has to buy $20 permits, and then nobody calls. All you effectively did was cause everybody $20 worth of damage for the year, because it's not being enforced on a regular basis by complaint. So I think that's one of the questions that I think should be contemplated. whether is it enforced daily or is it just a complaint based?
I mean, that's a great question. I don't know if I have come across a city that is complaint-based. Do you have any comments on that, Thomas or Karen?
Well, yeah. I agree with you. I think I think through your research you'll find that it's enforced by some other party, and then I don't know how useful that'll be, but I mean that's part of the research, I guess.
I also think it should be an anonymous complaint-based system. I don't think it is right now, and that's probably what keeps people from complaining.
Well, currently the 72-hour rule that we do have for California Vehicle Code, we do take anonymous complaints and
Oh, you do? Okay.
we do. And the two cities I did look at, one was Beverly Hills. I believe there's a link to a complaint basis. Is they don't require a lot of information. They require a pin drop and a location, maybe a description of the car, but most of it was optional. I mean, I was just clicking through one of them and I was able to just put a pin drop and file a complaint with nothing else. So it can be anonymous.
Okay, I think that's really important, and probably should be in our recommendation that it be, or in our, not a recommendation, but our report, that it be anonymous, because I think that'll bring a huge comfort level to people when they are reporting. That's all.
I agree. Like, for instance, the other thing that, I realized when I was reading about San Mateo, that they do have stickers, but it's run by labs. So you could have both. You could have, because when you think about stickers, you're going to trigger a complaint base, because if somebody sees a car that doesn't have a sticker, they could call, right? But then it's also enforced by labs. So you could have both too.
So will we be able to get an updated list of questions to ask the cities and the cities to call? And also, who do we call? Is this like, do I call a city, like who do I talk to at San Mateo? Will there be some guidance on that perhaps?
I'm just going off as an employee in Public Works. I would say reach out to the Public Works Department.
Yeah, it's for two cities. I mean, I know for National City, it's the Parking Department and it's ran by Public Works and Planning. It's not the police department, so do not call the police department because you will not get an answer.
I'll tell them you sent us, thanks.
What was the case in San Mateo, Christian?
What was that?
Do we know what department dealt with it in San Mateo?
Well, like Commander Garcia said, a lot of these cities, they have a parking enforcement department. But also, Commander Garcia, if you come across any questions, just email it to us so we could, incorporate it.
I'll send it over to Tomas. Yes.
Thank you. Okay, so can we move on with the agenda? New business. Anybody has any new business update? No new business update. Good. Staff updates.
Nothing of any significance in considering the time.
Thank you. And chair and committee members matters.
It's our 10th anniversary.
There have been no updates on the park, the development over at Sierra Point. Also, there has been no developments, I believe, on that.
No, remember the council was there was going to be citywide outreach, and then the council was going to decide the next steps.
Okay, thank you for that, Darius. So, Pat has...
Actually, a question for staff. Now that Crocker Trail is under construction, I was wondering, will there be any changes made to the crossings, say on West Hill Drive or any of the other streets? Are there any plans to do anything there?
The master plan has suggested changes on just about all of them, but we're finding that there isn't that much extra funding from the grant funds. We did issue a PO for the rapid reflective flashing beacons at West Hill that was proposed in the master plan, but I believe the contractor got faulty equipment sent to them, so it's taken a while that should be, you ought to see that in the next, I would hope, month or two. The other ones, we are not proposing probably significant changes. We're more wrestling with vehicles on the trail, and there are going to be some signs that say no motor vehicles. That's in the California Vehicle Code, because we're getting PG&E and AT&T trying to go on the trail to do maintenance, their access points. So we're looking at kind of blocking those off so that it isn't damaged, that this new trail doesn't get damaged, or it's not unsafe for people that are using it.
Did you just, on a question on that, where the dog run areas, they typically do drive back into that. So that will no longer be allowed?
Looking at access from the other side.
From walking down, but the operator drives back, or the person who operates the facility, they would not drive either?
We haven't really gotten into that
Okay,
with them yet, so I'm
Okay.
reluctant to talk
Okay.
about it here first.
yeah, okay.
Thank you for that. So our next meeting is going to be September 6, 2023. And with that, we are adjourned the meeting at 8:35 p.m. Thank you all.